Hello, let's learn how we can apply a background to our interior scene. Now first of all, let's go to our render setup. Now let's go to our scene, and in here we will see the noise limit. So when we start rendering, and not an interactive render but actually rendering our final image, we have to tell it the noise level limit until which it's going to render. So a good noise level limit, it's between 3 and 5% for final production. Now if you just need it as a draft, I'd say 8 to 10% will be fine. So let's go ahead and type in 5% for this example. Also down here we will have the denoising. So what the denoising is going to do, it's basically going to reduce the noise from our image. So for this, we're going to just go ahead and select the Corona High Quality. The amount is going to be fine at 0.65 and the radius at 1. Now let's go into the Common tab. Here you can see that we've locked our aspect ratio. So we have a 1500 by 1125. For final production renders, it's best if we just the longest side, which in this case it's our width. Let's use 3000 pixels, and if your aspect ratio is locked, the height will automatically follow this value. Now, this will dramatically increase your rendering time, so it's better to leave it at around 2000 for now. So we're going to be rendering a 2000 by 1500 pixel image. In order for us to integrate an image for our background, we first need to find that type of image. The best method to do that is to take our image to Photoshop. In Photoshop, we're going to be applying it a background, which we will then import it to our Corona renderer for us to render it with our whole 3D model here. So it's better for us to do it rather than for me to be explaining it so that you can understand it better. So once all of these settings are ready to go, we're going to hit the render button up here. It's no longer an interactive render, it's just a render. So let's go ahead and render this image. The rendering engine for Corona renderer, it's based on our RAM capacity. So the time of rendering will depend on your RAM. So if we go ahead and go to the stats tab, we can see here the noise level. So more or less, we should be able to have an estimate of the remaining noise level in the image. So I'll come back when this is done. So I actually stopped my render at 6.4% at noise level. Now the reason behind this is because we have to first add a background before we go all the way. So let's just save it. Let's make sure to save it as a PNG, and let's just choose the type. I'm going to go for a PNG. Now this is important that you do this because we have to add a background. I'm just going to name it background and choose the preferred file that you would like to save this in, and let's just save it. Now in here, again, because it's not our final render, the RGB 24-bit is more than enough. So let's just hit the OK. Alright, now let's go to Photoshop. So here's my PNG. I'm going to right click and open with Adobe Photoshop. Okay, here in Photoshop, we can see that we don't have any background. So we need to find an image on the internet that will go along with our interior here. So let's go and find one. Now a website that I recommend, it's docsnap.io, because the images here are not under any copyright license. So we can use it for free. Because we're doing a rustic design, it'll be nice to have a green field background on it. So I'm just going to type in green field. Alright, so again, all of these photos are free to use. Something like this would be nice. Now another website that I recommend is pexels.com, which also has high quality free copyright images. So again, I'm just going to type in green field. And let's look for one that matches our interior. I can use this one. So let's just download it. So I have my two backgrounds downloaded here. I'm just going to drag this one from Pexels. Okay, I'm just going to double click. Now in my right side, and we're going to be talking about Photoshop in more in depth afterwards. But for now, let's just add a background. Now in our right side, we have the layers. Now you can see that my background image, which I just downloaded, is on top of my layer, which is my actual render. So if I wanted to hide one of these layers, I just click on this eye icon. So you can see that there's my render and my background is on top of it. What I want to do is just to place it beneath my render. So I'm just going to click and drag like so. Now to move it, I'm going to just press Ctrl+T, and now this will let me scale up or down my image. So we can do this by using these control points here, and I'm just going to drag it like so. Now to move it, I just have to click and hold my left button of the mouse. One thing that we must be very careful is with the horizon line. And we can use the end of this green field as our reference for our horizon line. So what we need to do now is just to match it with our perspective. So let's increase it a little bit and bring it down. There we go. This looks pretty good. Now the next thing that we have to do is just to match the lighting from our exterior photo with our interior scene. So obviously our exterior is way too pronounced. We have to increase the lighting of our background. So to do this, I'm going to just go over here to our adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to levels. So my levels adjustment layer is going to make sure to level our lighting of the image. Right now, these levels are acting on both of my layers, on my rendering and also on my background. I just want this layer to act on top of my background. I don't want to mess with the lighting of my interior render. So I'm just going to drag this layer beneath my render, so this one will not affect my actual interior. So inside our layer, we can see our dark tones, which are at the left, and our brighter tones, which are at the right side. To turn the darker tones into a more lighter tone, we have to just click and drag this little arrow here to the right side. And you can see how my image starts to brighten up. Now, as our interior has a pretty high lighting coming from the exterior, and we can actually see this if we go closer to our window frame here, you can see how the reflections from the exterior are making our window frame very bright here in this side. So we need to match that lighting. Obviously, the lighting from our exterior has to be brighter than the light from our interior. So let's just keep dragging this a little bit more, and let's actually make it a little bit visible, like so. Now, what I want to do is just to save my background, which is this one. So I've just hidden my render with the eye icon. Now I just want to save this image so that I can import it to my Corona renderer. To do so, I'm going to go to File and Save As, and I actually want to save it on my computer. And this time I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So I'm going to go down here to JPEG, and I'm going to name it Background Ready. Let's save it and make sure that the quality is at its maximum and also 12. Okay, so sometimes we're going to have it at 10 by default. So let's just increase this all the way to 12. The baseline in standard is more than enough, and I'm going to just hit OK now. Alright, so now let's bring this to our Corona renderer slate material. Alright, so I'm just going to close this render, and I'm going to go to my material editor. Now I'm going to add another tab, and this tab is going to be named Background. Alright, so let's bring in that image that we just created. So for this, I'm going to go to my search by name, Corona bitmap. And I highly suggest doing this method, because if you notice, and I'm going to cancel this to show you something, if I go to my materials tab, notice that all of our textures are not Corona bitmaps. They are just regular bitmaps. Now there's not much difference between using a regular bitmap rather than our Corona bitmap, but it's better if we just work everything with the settings from Corona. Now let's go back to background. And now within our Corona bitmap, we haven't chosen anything. So let's just double click it. And down here, we have the bitmap option. I'm just going to click in load map, and let's find our image. Now I know it's this one because we saved it as background ready. Now notice that in the environment mapping, so actually our Corona bitmap is mapping this image already, we have to change the mode from spherical to screen, because it's just a flat image. It's not actually an HDRI, So HDRIs are actually just 360 images. And in our case, we just used a JPEG 2D image. So we have to choose the screen mode here. Okay. Now, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that we've edited this image without using the Corona tone mapping. So let's go to our frame buffer. So inside our render setup, let's go to scene and show frame buffer. So in here, if we go to our post tab, we can see our tone mapping. So because we edited this image by itself in Photoshop, once we plug it in so that it can appear in our actual render, it's also going to acquire the tone mapping options. So it's going to have a higher contrast, it's going to have a highlight compression, and so on. But we don't want that. We want to cancel these tone mappings because we have already edited this image in Photoshop. So to tell Corona renderer that we don't want to use these tone mapping settings with our Corona bitmap here, we need to call in a Corona tone map control. Okay, so this component is actually going to control the tone mapping that we've applied here. And here we have that this tone map control will be affected by its exposure and the tone mapping. So we only have to uncheck this two values because the exposure will basically just burn our image because it already has lots of light on it. So if we open the preview window, you can see that the light is pretty high. We don't want this to be affected by the exposure or the tone mapping here. So let's just plug it in like so. And now how do we add this to our render? Let's close this and let's go to our render setup, and within our scene tab, if we go down here, we will see that we can override these maps. For example, we have the direct visibility override, we have the reflections override, and the refractions override. So remember that we were talking about the refraction. So again, when the light passes through a surface, such as a glass or water, it's going to bend itself. So what we want to see, it's our actual background that we just created in Photoshop. That's why we need to put it in the refractions override, because we want to see it after it has passed the glass. And I can just drag it in like a Corona sky into this option right here. I'm going to tell it to instance this and just press the OK button. And now let's just start an interactive render. Okay, so this is something that we obviously don't want, and what we need to do right now is just to lower the refraction on our glass material. Let's go back to our slate material. Let's just double click on our Corona physical material, and here the index of refraction is at 1.5. Now one thing to keep in mind, that the index of refraction for a glass, for a window, it's around 1.1. So let's type in 1.1, and now let's start our interactive render again. Alright, so this looks much better. So this is the end of this lecture. Make sure to try out your own backgrounds and adjust them in Adobe Photoshop. So for the next lecture, we're just going to be talking about importing high quality 3D assets. So I'll see you then. Bye bye.